Professor Zelnath adjusted the holographic display with one of his 4 tentacles, the blue-green appendage moving with practiced precision across the control interface. The lecture hall of the Galactic Military Academy fell silent as 200 cadets from 17 different species settled into their bioadaptive seats. The familiar hum of the environmental systems created a comfortable backdrop as students from worlds spanning 3 spiral arms of the galaxy prepared for what they assumed would be another routine lesson in primitive warfare tactics. Today, we examine the military strategies of a recently discovered species, Zelnath announced, his translator device converting his natural harmonic frequencies into the standard galactic tongue. The humans of Sol 3, also known as Earth, achieved spaceflight merely decades ago. Their inclusion in our database represents one of the youngest civilizations we've encountered. A ripple of dismissive clicks and chirps spread through the audience. Cadet Zephyra, a crystalline being from the Andorian hegemony, allowed her light patterns to flicker in amusement. "How primitive could they possibly be, Professor?" she asked, her voice carrying the musical quality typical of her species. "Did they even manage to eliminate warfare before achieving interstellar capability?" The professor's membrane-covered eyes darkened slightly. "An interesting question, Cadet. That assumption reveals much about our own cultural biases. No, the humans did not eliminate warfare. In fact, they carried it with them into space." Shocked gasps echoed through the chamber. Lieutenant Torkson, a reptilian Valkyrian serving as a guest instructor, straightened in his seat. Throughout known galactic civilization, the pattern remained consistent. Species developed psychic abilities, achieved unity of thought, eliminated conflict, then reached for the stars. War was considered a primitive stage that intelligent life inevitably outgrew, like a child abandoning simple toys. "Surely you're mistaken," Torkson interjected. "No species has ever achieved faster-than-light travel while maintaining active military conflicts. The psychological unity required for such technological advancement makes warfare impossible." Zelnath's tentacles moved in what those familiar with his species recognized as the equivalent of a knowing smile. The humans achieved their space program during something they called the Cold War, a decades-long military standoff between 2 massive alliance blocs. They literally reached their moon while pointing thousands of planet-killing weapons at each other. The silence that followed was profound. Even the usual background chatter of the hive mind students ceased entirely. "This is obviously an error in the database," declared Cadet Mordun, his insectoid features clicking with certainty. "Perhaps their historians fabricated these records to appear more formidable to galactic civilization." Professor Zelnath moved to the central display. "I thought the same initially. However, the evidence is overwhelming. Today, we'll examine actual footage of human military operations, starting with their most recent global conflict, what they call World War II. The lights dimmed and the holographic projectors activated. The first images showed aerial views of vast industrial complexes, smokestacks reaching toward gray skies, and countless humans moving with ant-like precision around massive manufacturing facilities. "Note the scale," Zelnath commented as the images shifted. "These factories produced war materials for 6 years straight. The humans converted their entire planetary economy to military production. Every adult member of their species contributed to the war effort in some capacity." Cadet Zephyra's crystalline form flickered uncertainly. "The entire planet? But how did they maintain agricultural production? Surely they couldn't sustain billions while dedicating everything to warfare." "They mobilized their entire female population into the workforce for the first time in their history," the professor explained. "Human females took over agricultural production, manufacturing, and research while their males fought across multiple continents simultaneously." The footage shifted to show massive convoys of vehicles moving across snow-covered landscapes. Hundreds of armored vehicles stretched to the horizon, their metal treads grinding through frozen earth while aircraft provided overhead escort. "This is the Eastern Front," Zelnath narrated. Two human nations fought across a battle line stretching over 2,000 kilometers. The scale of this single campaign exceeded the total military capacity of most current galactic civilizations. A new image appeared. Thousands of aircraft filling the sky like mechanical locusts. The students watched in growing amazement as wave after wave of bombers moved in perfect formation, their numbers seemingly endless. 1,000 bombers, the professor stated simply. This was a routine daily operation for the humans. They built and crewed enough aircraft to darken their skies, then sent them to destroy each other's cities with mechanical precision. The footage continued, showing naval battles involving hundreds of ships spread across oceanic expanses larger than entire continents. Massive vessels exchanged gunfire, while smaller craft darted between them like metallic fish, and aircraft launched from floating cities engaged in aerial combat above the waves. Their naval warfare involved floating cities, Zelnath explained as images of aircraft carriers filled the display. Mobile bases capable of projecting power across their planet's vast oceans. Each carrier represented the pinnacle of their technology, crewed by thousands, and capable of supporting hundreds of aircraft. Lieutenant Torkson leaned forward, his reptilian features tight with concentration. Professor, the logistics alone. How do they supply these operations? The resource management required would challenge our most advanced AI systems. Entirely through organic intelligence, came the reply. Humans calculated supply lines, coordinated attacks, and managed complex battle strategies using only their biological brains. No AI assistance, no psychic networking, no technological enhancement beyond basic radio communication. The implications began to sink in among the students. Cadet Mordunn's mandibles clicked nervously. You're saying they coordinated planetary-scale military operations using the same level of technology we employed for basic planetary surveys? Less, actually, Zelnath confirmed. Their computers were primitive mechanical devices. Most calculations were performed by hand, by human mathematicians working with paper and simple tools. The footage shifted again, showing close-up combat scenes. Individual humans moved through destroyed urban landscapes, their faces covered with crude masks, carrying weapons that seemed impossibly primitive, yet somehow effective. The camera captured their expressions, not the glazed emptiness of psychically controlled troops or the mechanical precision of enhanced soldiers, but alert, thinking faces making independent decisions in a chaos of battle. Notice their tactics, the professor pointed out. Each small unit operates independently, adapting to local conditions without central control. When communication breaks down, they continue fighting using their own judgment. That's impossible, Zephyral whispered, her light patterns flickering with disbelief. Coordinated military action requires unified command. How could they possibly maintain any semblance of strategic coherence? They trained extensively in what they called initiative. Individual soldiers were expected to make tactical decisions that supported overall strategy, even when cut off from command structures. Their military doctrine actually assumed communication would fail and planned accordingly. The students exchanged uncertain glances. In galactic military doctrine, losing communication with command was considered equivalent to defeat. Troops without psychic or electronic guidance became helpless, unable to coordinate or make strategic decisions. The display showed artillery batteries firing in precise sequences, their massive guns hurling shells across dozens of kilometers with mathematical accuracy. Human spotters, positioned in dangerous forward locations, called in corrections using only voice communication and visual observation. Their artillery crews, Zelnath continued, calculated firing solutions in real time using mechanical computers and printed tables. The precision they achieved rivaled our modern targeting systems. Mechanical computers? Lieutenant Torkson's voice carried a note of disbelief. You mean they performed ballistic calculations using gears and springs? Mechanical calculation devices, yes. But more often they used printed reference tables and human mathematicians. The artillery crews memorized hundreds of calculations and could adjust fire based on weather conditions, terrain variations, and target movement, all performed by organic brains in high-stress combat situations. The footage showed massive naval guns firing in synchronized volleys, their shells visible as they arced through the sky toward targets beyond the horizon. The mathematical precision required to hit moving targets at such distances using purely mechanical systems was staggering. How accurate were they? Asked Cadet Voltar, a methane-breathing representative of the Outer Rim colonies. Naval gunfire could consistently hit moving targets at ranges exceeding 25 kilometers, Zelnath replied, using only visual range-finding, mechanical computers, and human gunners. The display shifted to show aerial combat, fighters engaging in complex, three-dimensional battles above cloud layers. The aircraft moved with impossible grace, turning inside each other's flight paths, while pilots made split-second decisions about angle, speed, and weapon deployment. Aerial combat required them to solve complex physics problems while experiencing extreme gravitational forces, the professor explained. Pilots calculated intercept courses, ammunition conservation, and tactical positioning while their aircraft moved at several hundred kilometers per hour. Without computer assistance, Mordun's voice had risen to a higher pitch. The most advanced fighters had mechanical gun sights. Everything else depended on pilot skill, experience, and intuition. The students watched human pilots engaging in dogfights that resembled deadly dances in the sky. Aircraft rolled and dove in seemingly random patterns that somehow resolved into tactical advantages, pilots anticipating their opponents' moves through pure reasoning and reflex. As the footage concluded, Professor Zelnath allowed the lights to brighten gradually. The lecture hall remained silent, except for the environmental systems. Students from a dozen species sat motionless, processing what they had witnessed. Tomorrow, Zelnath announced, we'll examine how the humans coordinated these global operations without any form of enhanced communication or artificial intelligence. We'll also discuss their industrial capacity and how they sustained 6 years of total warfare while maintaining civilian populations. As the cadets filed out, their conversations were subdued. Zephyra approached Lieutenant Torkson, her crystalline form pulsing with uncertain patterns. "Sir," she said quietly, "if the humans could achieve such military effectiveness with primitive technology, what capabilities might they possess now that they've had access to galactic knowledge?" Torkson's reptilian features remained thoughtful. "That, cadet, is precisely what concerns me. If they maintained active military capabilities while developing spaceflight, they likely continued advancing their warfare techniques alongside their space technology." Neither of them noticed Professor Zelnath's tentacles curl in what his species considered a troubled expression as he overheard their conversation. The implications they were beginning to grasp represented only the smallest glimpse of what the complete human military record revealed. The following morning brought an unusual tension to the Galactic Military Academy. Word of the previous day's lecture had spread through the student networks, and attendance in Professor Zelnath's classroom had nearly doubled. Cadets from species who rarely showed interest in military history now crowded the amphitheater-style seating, their various forms of communication creating a babble of clicks, hums, and harmonic frequencies. Commander Thixel, the Academy's senior tactical instructor, had taken a seat in the rear observation area. The six-limbed sectorian's presence indicated official interest from the Academy administration. Several other faculty members had also arrived, their bioluminescent patches glowing with anticipation. Professor Zelnath entered the chamber carrying a data pad that seemed almost insignificant considering the revolutionary information it contained. His tentacles moved with deliberate precision as he activated the holographic displays. But observant students noticed the slight tremor that indicated stress among his species. Yesterday's footage raised important questions about human military capabilities. He began without preamble. Today we examine how they coordinated such vast operations. We'll start with their communication systems. The display activated, showing a massive room filled with hundreds of humans seated at mechanical devices. Cables snaked across the floor in organized chaos, connecting to panels covered with lights, switches, and rotating dials. The humans wore headphones and spoke into microphones while manipulating controls with remarkable speed and precision. This is a military communications center from the World War II period, Zelnath explained. Every connection you see represents a voice communication link. Humans coordinated global military operations using nothing more sophisticated than audio transmissions. Cadet Zephyrah's crystalline form flickered with confusion. Professor, how could it possibly maintain operational security? Any species with basic electronic surveillance could intercept those transmissions. They developed increasingly sophisticated encryption methods, came the reply. But, more importantly, they learned to operate under the assumption that their enemies were listening to everything. Human military doctrine incorporated the expectation of compromised communications. The footage shifted to show radio operators in field conditions, humans crouched in foxholes or cramped vehicle compartments, speaking rapidly into handheld devices while explosions created interference around them. Despite the chaos, messages continued to flow with mechanical regularity. Field communications often failed entirely, Zelnath noted. Human units developed autonomous decision-making capabilities to function without central coordination. Squad leaders made tactical choices that supported strategic objectives without receiving specific orders. Lieutenant Torkson raised a clawed hand. Professor, that violates fundamental military principles. How could they maintain strategic coherence if local commanders acted independently? Through what they called mission-type orders, the professor replied. Superior officers communicated objectives and constraints, then trusted subordinates to determine methods. This created incredible flexibility and resilience. The display showed a human officer briefing a group of subordinates using hand-drawn maps and simple charts. The meeting took place in a partially destroyed building, with the sounds of distant combat clearly audible. Despite the primitive conditions, the officers discussed complex tactical concepts with obvious competence. Notice their planning methodology, Zelnath pointed out. They anticipated failure at every level. Plans included contingencies for lost communication, disrupted supply lines, enemy breakthroughs, and equipment failures. They literally planned to continue fighting when everything went wrong. Commander Thixel leaned forward, his multiple eyes focusing intently on the display. Among the Sectorians, military planning relied on precise coordination through psychic networks. The concept of independent decision-making was almost incomprehensible. The footage transitioned to show manufacturing facilities that dwarfed anything in current galactic civilization. Vast assembly lines stretched beyond the camera's range, with thousands of humans working in coordinated sequences. Aircraft, vehicles, weapons, and equipment emerged in impossible quantities. Their industrial capacity was perhaps more impressive than their tactical abilities, the professor continued. The human nation called the United States produced approximately 300,000 aircraft during the 6-year conflict. Stunned silence filled the chamber. Cadet Mordunn's mandibles clicked repeatedly, a sign of severe agitation among his species. 300,000? He managed finally. Professor, our most advanced shipyards can produce perhaps 50 vessels per year. How could a primitive species achieve such output? Mass production techniques that we still study today, Zelnath replied. They standardized designs, perfected assembly line methods, and trained millions of workers in specialized tasks. A human factory could produce a complete bomber aircraft in less than one planetary rotation. The display showed women working at manufacturing stations, their hands moving with mechanical precision as they assembled components. The camera panned across endless rows of identical workstations, each producing parts that would combine into instruments of war. They mobilized their entire civilian population, the professor explained. Children collected scrap metal, Elderly citizens rolled bandages, and their female population entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers. Every human contributed to the war effort in some capacity. But the logistics, protested Cadet Veltar, his methane-breathing apparatus hissing with agitation. Moving materials, coordinating production, distributing finished products. The computational requirements would overwhelm our most advanced AI systems. Humans developed what they called operations research, mathematical methods for optimizing complex systems using only mechanical calculation devices, and human intelligence. They solved logistical problems that we would consider impossible without quantum computing assistance. The footage shifted to show massive convoys moving across continental distances. Thousands of vehicles traveled in organized sequences, their movement coordinated by humans with radio communication and written schedules. Supply depots appeared like mushrooms across vast landscapes, each stocked with precisely the materials needed by advancing forces. The human military moved millions of soldiers and billions of tons of equipment across their planet's surface, Zelnath narrated. They coordinated shipping schedules, railroad timetables, and truck convoys using human dispatchers and mechanical accounting systems. New images showed ports filled with hundreds of ships loading simultaneously. Cranes moved in carefully choreographed sequences while thousands of workers handled cargo with remarkable efficiency. The scale of coordination required boggled minds accustomed to AI-managed logistics. This single port, the professor indicated, processed more cargo during the war years than our most advanced space stations handle in a decade, using human workers, mechanical equipment, and paper record-keeping. Commander Thicksail's voice carried a note of disbelief. Professor, you're describing capabilities that exceed current galactic standards. How is this possible from a species that hadn't even achieved basic space travel? That question brings us to perhaps the most disturbing aspect of human military development, Zelnath replied. Their warfare techniques continued evolving throughout the conflict. They didn't simply apply existing knowledge, they innovated under pressure. The display showed human engineers working in field conditions, modifying equipment with available materials. Soldiers welded additional armor onto vehicles, mechanics jury-rigged repairs using salvage components, and technicians adapted weapons for new purposes. Human forces modified their equipment constantly, the professor explained. Local commanders identified tactical requirements and implemented solutions without waiting for central approval. Innovation occurred at every level of their military hierarchy. The footage showed a sequence that particularly disturbed the alien observers. Humans building an airfield using manual labor and basic machinery. Thousands of workers leveled ground, laid foundation materials, and constructed facilities in a matter of days. Aircraft began landing before construction was even complete. They could establish operational bases in any environment, Zelnath noted. Human engineers built airfields in jungles, deserts, frozen wastelands, and captured enemy territory, often under hostile fire. This is unprecedented, Commander Thicksail muttered. Most galactic species require decades to establish off-world facilities. These humans built functional military bases in days using primitive equipment. The display shifted to show perhaps the most shocking footage yet. Humans fighting in conditions that would kill most galactic species instantly. They operated in Arctic temperatures, tropical diseases, high altitudes, and underwater environments. Their equipment was crude by galactic standards, but their effectiveness was undeniable. Human adaptability was perhaps their greatest military asset, the professor explained. They fought successfully in every environment their planet offered. Desert, jungle, ocean, mountain, Arctic, humans developed specialized techniques for each condition. The footage showed troops advancing through waist-deep snow, their faces covered, but their movement coordinated despite the brutal conditions. Other scenes depicted soldiers moving through dense jungle, navigating by compass and map while fighting diseases that had no cure. They sustained combat operations in environments that would require environmental suits for most of us, Zelnath continued. Human biology proved remarkably adaptable to hostile conditions. Cadet Zephyrah's light patterns had shifted to deep blue, indicating profound confusion among her species. Professor, how do they maintain morale? Fighting in such conditions, with such primitive equipment, suffering casualties at rates that would break any civilized military. That brings us to the most troubling aspect of human psychology, the professor replied. They appear to become more effective under pressure. Combat stress that would paralyze most species seemed to sharpen human performance. The display showed close-up footage of individual humans in combat situations. Their faces revealed no glazed emptiness or mechanical calm. Instead, the camera captured alert, thinking beings making rapid decisions while explosions erupted around them. Notice their expressions, Zelnath pointed out. These are not mindless automatons or psychically controlled troops. Each human was thinking, evaluating, adapting independently while coordinating with their comrades. That's impossible, declared Lieutenant Torkson. Effective military action requires unified command and control. Individual initiative leads to chaos. Yet somehow, it worked, the professor replied simply. Human military units maintained cohesion while allowing tremendous individual flexibility. Squad members made independent tactical decisions that somehow supported overall strategy. The footage concluded with scenes of victory celebrations. Humans gathered in massive crowds, their faces showing joy and relief, but also something else, a quiet competence that suggested they were already planning for whatever challenges might come next. As the lights brightened, Professor Zelnath addressed the silent chamber. Tomorrow, we'll examine human technological innovation during wartime. We'll see how they developed entirely new categories of weapons while fighting across multiple continents simultaneously. Commander Thixael remained in his seat as the students filed out. His multiple eyes tracked the professor with obvious concern. Zelnath, he called out once the chamber had emptied. These capabilities you're describing, they suggest the humans might be the most militarily gifted species we've ever encountered. The professor's tentacles curled in acknowledgement. Commander, I haven't even shown them the truly disturbing footage yet. What we've seen so far represents human warfare at its most conventional. As the two faculty members departed, neither noticed the small recording device that Cadet Mordun had left behind, its sensors faithfully transmitting their conversation to recipients unknown. The Galactic Military Academy's emergency conference room had never hosted such an unusual gathering. 3 admirals, 2 generals, and a collection of the Academy's most senior faculty members surrounded the central holographic display where Professor Zelnath stood with obvious discomfort. His tentacles twitched with nervous energy as he prepared to present information that had already begun reshaping military thinking across known space. Admiral Zorthak, Supreme Commander of the Galactic Defense Fleet, gestured for silence with one of his forearms. The Regellian's blue-tinted carapace reflected the room's ambient lighting as he spoke in the multi-harmonic tones that indicated highest priority communications among his species. Professor, he began, reports from your lectures have reached the highest levels of military command. We need a comprehensive briefing on these human warfare capabilities before this information spreads further. Zelnath's membrane-covered eyes darkened. Admiral, with respect, I've barely begun to present the truly concerning material. What the students have seen so far represents relatively conventional human military operations. General Vexura, the insectoid commander of ground forces, clicked her mandibles impatiently. Professor, you've described industrial capacity that exceeds our current capabilities and coordination methods that challenge our basic understanding of military science. What could possibly be more concerning? The holographic display activated, showing images that immediately commanded attention. Massive mushroom-shaped clouds rose above distant landscapes, while shockwaves rippled across the ground in expanding circles. The destruction was visible from orbit, creating scars on the planetary surface that could be seen from space. The humans developed weapons capable of destroying entire cities with single devices, Zelnath announced quietly. They achieved this breakthrough during active warfare, then used these weapons to end their global conflict. The silence that followed was absolute. Among all known galactic civilizations, weapons of mass destruction remained theoretical concepts. No species had ever developed planet-killing capabilities while still engaged in active warfare. The psychological unity required for such technological advancement naturally prevented their military application. Admiral Zorthak leaned forward, his four eyes focusing intently on the display. Professor, are you suggesting the humans developed these weapons and then actually used them against their own species? Twice, came the reply. They detonated 2 nuclear devices over populated cities, killing approximately 300,000 of their own kind in a matter of minutes. The implications crashed through the room like a physical force. General Vexera's compound eyes dilated to maximum aperture, a sign of extreme stress among her species. That's genocide. No rational species would develop such weapons, let alone use them. The humans calculated that nuclear warfare would result in fewer total casualties than conventional invasion, Zelnath explained. They performed mathematical analysis and concluded that maximum destruction in the short term would minimize long-term suffering. The display shifted to show the aftermath. Cities reduced to radioactive wastelands, humans treating radiation sickness, and the systematic documentation of nuclear effects on living beings. Human scientists moved through the devastation with instruments, carefully recording data for future reference. They studied the results, the professor continued. Human researchers documented every aspect of nuclear warfare: biological effects, structural damage, radiation patterns, psychological impact. They treated their own weapons test as a learning experience. Commander Quindar, the Academy's senior intelligence officer, raised one of his crystalline appendages. Professor, this suggests a level of ruthless calculation that we've never encountered. Most species would be traumatized by such devastation. How did the humans respond? They built more weapons, Zelnath replied simply. Bigger, more efficient, more destructive. Within decades, they possessed enough nuclear armaments to sterilize their entire planet multiple times over. New footage appeared showing vast underground facilities filled with missiles. Row after row of nuclear weapons stretched beyond the camera's range, each one capable of destroying a major population center. Humans in protective clothing moved among them with casual efficiency, performing maintenance and upgrades. This is a single storage facility, the professor noted. The humans built hundreds of such installations across their planet. Conservative estimates suggest they accumulated over 60,000 nuclear weapons. Admiral Zorthak's carapace had shifted to a deep purple, indicating profound disturbance among Rigelians. 60,000? Professor, that's enough destructive power to eliminate life on dozens of inhabited worlds. They understood the mathematics perfectly, Zelnath confirmed. Human strategists calculated exactly how many weapons would be required to destroy every major population center on their planet. Then, they built 10 times that number. The display showed a new category of weapon: intercontinental ballistic missiles rising from underground silos, their flames visible from orbit as they accelerated beyond their planet's atmosphere. The footage tracked multiple launches simultaneously, each missile following a precisely calculated trajectory across continents. They militarized space itself, the professor explained. Human rockets could deliver nuclear weapons to any target on their planet within 30 minutes. No location was safe from retaliation. General Vexera's voice carried a note of incredulity. Professor, you're describing a species that achieved the capability to extinct themselves, then continued developing more efficient methods. This contradicts everything we understand about rational behavior. It gets worse, Zelnath replied grimly. They didn't stop with nuclear weapons. The footage shifted to show laboratories where humans in protective suits worked with substances that registered as hazardous to the Academy's sensors even through recorded images. Scientists manipulated microscopic organisms while monitoring equipment tracked their biological modifications. Biological warfare, the professor announced. Humans weaponized diseases, creating pathogens specifically designed to kill other humans. They developed viruses, bacteria, and toxins that could spread through air, water, or direct contact. Commander Quindar's crystalline form flickered with disbelief. They turned their own planet's life forms into weapons? Professor, most species consider biological research sacred. Using it for warfare would be unthinkable. Humans approached biological warfare with the same systematic methodology they applied to nuclear weapons, Zelnath continued. They studied transmission vectors, incubation periods, and mortality rates. They created vaccines for their own forces while developing pathogens to use against enemies. New images showed testing facilities where captured enemy equipment was exposed to various substances. Human technicians in full protective gear documented the results with scientific precision, treating warfare itself as a subject for systematic study. Chemical weapons development followed similar patterns, the professor noted. Humans created substances that could kill through skin contact, respiratory exposure, or environmental contamination. They tested these weapons extensively and developed deployment methods for battlefield use. The footage showed artillery shells containing chemical payloads, aircraft equipped to spray toxic substances over wide areas, and specialized troops trained to operate in contaminated environments. The scale and sophistication of the programs rivaled anything in current galactic military science. Professor, Admiral Zorthak interjected, "You're describing weapons research that exceeds our most advanced military laboratories. How could a pre-spaceflight species achieve such technological sophistication?" "Because they never stopped fighting," came the reply. Galactic civilizations develop warfare capabilities, achieve unity, then focus on peaceful expansion. Humans continued developing military technology throughout their recorded history. Warfare drove their innovation for millennia. The display showed a timeline spanning centuries of human conflict. Each war introduced new weapons, new tactics, and new technological breakthroughs. The progression was relentless, from primitive weapons to firearms, from aircraft to guided missiles, from conventional explosives to nuclear annihilation. They've been perfecting the art of warfare for over 5,000 years, Zelnath explained. While other species moved beyond conflict, humans used each war to prepare for the next one. They never stopped innovating, never stopped improving their ability to destroy. General Baxara's mandíbulas clicar rapidly. Professor, if humans have been developing military technology for millennia, while most species spent equivalent time on peaceful pursuits, they must possess capabilities far beyond what we've seen. That brings us to their most recent innovations, the professor replied ominously. Remember, everything I've shown you so far represents technology they developed before achieving spaceflight. They've had decades to combine their warfare expertise with galactic knowledge. The display shifted to show more recent footage, images that the Academy's sensors struggled to classify, human facilities that seemed to bend space around themselves, weapons that fired projectiles at significant fractions of light speed, and defensive systems that appeared to manipulate fundamental forces. Modern human military technology incorporates principles from galactic science, Zelnath explained. They've applied their warfare-focused mindset to technologies we developed for peaceful exploration and research. Admiral Zorthak stood abruptly, his four arms gesturing in the Regelian equivalent of extreme alarm. Professor, are you suggesting the humans have weaponized galactic technology? That violates the fundamental principles of the Galactic Accords. Admiral, the humans never signed Galactic Accords, Zelnath replied quietly. They're not bound by our restrictions on military development. And, given their history, they probably wouldn't consider such restrictions logical. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. Every piece of technology, every scientific principle, Every innovation that galactic civilization had developed for peaceful purposes could potentially become a weapon in human hands. Commander Quindar's voice was barely audible. Professor, based on what you've presented, what would you estimate human military capabilities to be currently? Zelnath's tentacles curled in what his species considered a gesture of profound uncertainty. Commander, I honestly don't know. But, based on their historical patterns, they've probably been developing space-based weapons systems since the day they achieved orbit. They've had decades to combine galactic technology with 5 millennia of warfare experience. As the briefing concluded, the assembled officers remained in their seats, processing information that challenged their fundamental understanding of civilized behavior. The humans represented something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that had achieved technological advancement without abandoning their capacity for warfare. Outside the conference room, news of the briefing had begun spreading through military channels. Across known space, admirals and generals were quietly reassessing their strategic assumptions, while intelligence agencies began compiling comprehensive reports on human military potential. In the depths of the Academy's secure data vaults, automated systems were already flagging human civilization for elevated monitoring status. The galaxy was beginning to realize that their newest members might also be their most dangerous. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called with unprecedented urgency. Representatives from 47 civilizations filled the massive chamber that orbited the neutral moon of Kepler, 442c, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of concern that the universal translators struggled to process simultaneously. Ambassador Velterra of the Centauri Alliance called for order with a harmonic resonance that indicated maximum priority among her crystalline people. The chamber's acoustic dampeners activated, reducing the babble to manageable levels as representatives settled into their species-appropriate seating arrangements. Fellow counselors, Velterra announced, her form pulsing with the deep blue patterns that conveyed grave concern. We face an unprecedented situation. The humans of Sol 3 have requested full membership in galactic civilization, yet intelligence reports suggest they possess military capabilities that may exceed our combined defensive forces. A ripple of unease passed through the assembled delegates. The Hive Queen of Sector 7 spoke through her drone representative, her collective consciousness expressing confusion through rapid mandible movements. Honored Ambassador, the drone clicked. Surely this is an exaggeration. No single species could threaten the combined might of galactic civilization. We represent the accumulated knowledge and resources of billions of years of peaceful development. Ambassador Tharn of the Regelian hegemony activated his personal display, showing military assessment reports that had been circulating through intelligence networks for days. Fellow delegates, I'm afraid the situation is more serious than many realize. Our military analysts have spent weeks reviewing human warfare footage, and their conclusions are deeply troubling. The central chamber display activated, showing Admiral Zorthak's assessment briefing. Charts and graphs illustrated human military development across millennia, with exponential curves that climbed beyond the display's upper limits. The humans have never stopped developing warfare technology, Tharn continued. While our civilizations progressed beyond conflict, they continued perfecting methods of destruction for over 5,000 years. They represent the culmination of military evolution. Counselor Kexinda of the Outer Rim Confederacy raised a serpentine appendage. Ambassador Tharn, even granting superior military technology, humans represent a single species on one planet. We control resources across thousands of worlds. Surely numerical advantage compensates for technological superiority. That assumption may be dangerously incorrect, replied Ambassador Velterra. Human population growth patterns and reproductive capabilities suggest they could colonize available worlds faster than any known species. Combined with their military mindset, this could result in rapid territorial expansion. The display shifted to show demographic projections based on human historical data. Population curves indicated explosive growth potential when environmental constraints were removed. Models suggested humans could establish significant colonies across dozens of worlds within decades. More concerning, Tharn added, humans demonstrate unprecedented adaptability. They've successfully inhabited every environment their planet offers, from Arctic wastelands to tropical diseases zones. This suggests they could colonize worlds that other species consider uninhabitable. Counselor Morthay K. of the Silicon Collective transmitted his concerns through electromagnetic pulses that the chamber's systems converted to audible communication. Fellow delegates, we may be approaching this incorrectly. Perhaps integration rather than confrontation represents the wisest course. Integration assumes compatibility, replied the Hive Queen's drone. Human military culture may be fundamentally incompatible with galactic civilization. Their willingness to use weapons of mass destruction against their own species suggests decision-making processes we cannot predict or understand. Ambassador Velterra called up classified intelligence reports that have been circulating among the inner council members. Recent surveillance indicates humans have been developing what they call space marines, military units specifically trained for combat in extraterrestrial environments. This suggests they've been preparing for interstellar warfare since achieving space travel. The images showed human military facilities that had been constructed in Earth's orbital space. Massive installations surrounded their planet like a defensive shell, with weapon systems that incorporated technologies clearly derived from galactic databases. They've militarized their entire solar system, Tharn observed. Every asteroid mining operation includes defensive capabilities. Every space station can serve as a military base. They've turned their home system into a fortress. Counselor XYPHera of the distant reaches flickered her bioluminescent patches in patterns indicating deep concern. Honored colleagues, if humans have weaponized galactic technology, they may possess capabilities we cannot even recognize. Our sensors might be unable to detect their most advanced systems. The Chamber's environmental systems detected rising stress levels among multiple species and automatically adjusted atmospheric compositions to maintain calm. Despite these measures, anxiety continued building as delegates processed the implications of human military potential. We must consider, announced Counselor Vresh of the Core Worlds, that humans may already be monitoring our communications. Their historical patterns suggest extensive intelligence gathering capabilities. They might be aware of our concerns. This possibility sent visible shock waves through the assembled representatives. The concept that a species under evaluation might be monitoring the evaluators challenged fundamental assumptions about technological and intellectual superiority. Ambassador Velterra accessed the most classified files available to council members. Deep intelligence analysis suggests humans have developed what they term asymmetric warfare capabilities. Instead of matching our strengths, they focused on exploiting weaknesses we didn't know existed. The display showed theoretical models of how human military doctrine might apply to galactic-scale conflicts. Computer simulations indicated that small, highly mobile forces using advanced technology could disrupt civilizations dependent on centralized systems and predictable behavioral patterns. Traditional galactic military doctrine assumes opponents will follow rational patterns, Tharn explained. Humans appear to specialize in irrational tactics that produce rational results. They've developed strategies specifically designed to confuse and overwhelm conventional thinking. The Hive Queen's drone clicked rapidly. Ambassador, you're suggesting humans think in ways that our most advanced AI systems cannot predict. This contradicts everything we understand about logical behavior. That may be precisely their advantage, Velterra replied. Human military thinking incorporates elements that galactic civilization abandoned millennia ago: unpredictability, individual initiative, and willingness to accept massive risks for strategic advantage. Counselor Zephin of the Crystal Domains transmitted concerns through light-frequency modulation. Fellow delegates, we face a fundamental question. Can galactic civilization coexist with a species that views warfare as normal? The chamber fell silent as delegates contemplated this question. For billions of years, galactic civilization had been built on the assumption that rational species naturally evolved beyond military conflict. The humans represented a challenge to the philosophical foundations of interstellar society. Perhaps, suggested Counselor Morthake, we're approaching this from the wrong perspective. Human military capabilities might actually benefit galactic security. We've never faced external threats because none existed. But humans could serve as our military specialists. That assumes we could control or predict them, replied Ambassador Tharn. Human historical patterns suggest they make military decisions based on criteria we don't understand. Granting them military responsibility could lead to actions we consider irrational. The display activated again, showing the most disturbing intelligence report yet compiled. Human space installations that defied easy classification, energy signatures that suggested manipulation of fundamental forces, and defensive systems that appeared to violate several known principles of physics. Our most concerning discovery, Valterra announced, is that humans seem to be developing military applications for technologies we considered purely theoretical. They've made practical weapons from concepts our scientists thought impossible to implement. The implications were staggering. If humans could weaponize theoretical physics, their military potential might be literally unlimited. Technologies that galactic civilization had dismissed as impractical for warfare might already be operational in human hands. Counselor Kexinda's serpentine form coiled with agitation. Ambassador, are we certain these intelligence reports are accurate? The capabilities you're describing exceed anything in known science. Multiple independent sources confirm these observations, Tharn replied grimly. Human engineering capabilities appear to exceed their apparent technological level. They're achieving results that shouldn't be possible with available resources. Which brings us, Ambassador Valterra continued, to the most disturbing possibility of all. Humans may have been deliberately concealing their true capabilities during first contact procedures. What we've seen might represent only their conventional forces. The chamber's environmental systems detected stress levels approaching dangerous thresholds among several species and activated emergency calming measures. Despite chemical intervention, delegates continued exhibiting signs of profound anxiety. Fellow counselors, the Hive Queen announced through her drone, we must make a decision. Do we admit humans to full galactic membership, knowing they might possess overwhelming military superiority? Or do we risk conflict with a species that might be capable of defeating our combined forces? The question hung in the chamber's recycled atmosphere like a physical presence. Every delegate understood that either choice carried enormous risks. Accepting human membership might surrender galactic civilization to military domination. Rejecting their application might trigger the first interstellar war in galactic history. Ambassador Valterra called for a recess, allowing delegates to consult with their home governments. As representatives departed for secure communication chambers, their conversations carried a common theme. How had galactic civilization survived for billions of years without encountering anything like the humans? Outside the council chambers, automated intelligence systems were processing thousands of new data points about human military capabilities. Each analysis suggested that previous estimates had been conservative. Whatever the humans were truly capable of, it exceeded the worst-case scenarios that galactic military planners had conceived. In distant Sol system, human monitoring stations quietly recorded every transmission from the Galactic Council session. Admiral Sarah Chun reviewed the intercepts with professional interest, making notes about galactic intelligence capabilities and strategic thinking patterns. They're more thorough than expected, she observed to her staff. But they're still thinking in terms of conventional warfare. They haven't grasped the real scope of what we've been preparing. The final confrontation between human military doctrine and galactic civilization was approaching faster than anyone expected. Ambassador Sarah Chun stepped into the Galactic Council chamber with the confident stride that had made her famous during humanity's first contact negotiations. Behind her, a small delegation of human representatives took their positions at the species-neutral seating arrangement, their simple uniforms contrasting sharply with the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by other galactic delegates. The chamber's environmental systems detected new biosignatures and automatically adjusted atmospheric composition to accommodate human physiology. This routine accommodation somehow seemed ominous to observers who had spent weeks debating humanity's military potential. Ambassador Velterra of the Centauri Alliance called the emergency session to order, her crystalline form pulsing with the deep red patterns that indicated maximum formal importance among her species. Distinguished delegates, we convene this special session to address humanity's application for full galactic membership. Sarah Chun remained standing, a gesture that required no translation among species familiar with human body language. Her voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems as she addressed the assembled representatives. "Honored counselors," she began, "I understand you have concerns about humanity's military capabilities. Before we proceed with membership discussions, perhaps we should address those concerns directly." A ripple of surprise passed through the chamber. Ambassador Tharn of the Regelian hegemony exchanged glances with his advisors before responding. "Ambassador Chun, our intelligence services have compiled extensive reports on human warfare capabilities. We've observed military technologies and strategic doctrines that exceed our current understanding of tactical science." Sarah nodded with the matter-of-fact acknowledgement that characterized human diplomatic style. "Your intelligence services are quite thorough. However, your assessments may be based on incomplete information." She activated a portable display device, projecting holographic images that immediately commanded attention throughout the chamber. The first image showed Earth's solar system, but not as galactic surveys had recorded it. "This is our home system as it currently exists," Sarah announced. The display revealed defensive installations that dwarfed anything in galactic military architecture. Massive orbital platforms surrounded every planet, while asteroid mining operations had been converted into fortified positions that could house entire fleets. "The installations you've observed represent approximately 10% of our defensive capabilities," she continued calmly. "We spent the past 3 decades preparing for the possibility that galactic civilization might view humanity as a threat." The silence that followed was absolute. Even species that communicated through electromagnetic radiation ceased their transmissions, creating an eerie quiet that the chamber's environmental systems had never recorded. Counselor Kexinda of the Outer Rim Confederacy was the first to find words. "Ambassador Chun, you're suggesting that human military preparations exceed what our most advanced surveillance detected." "Counselor, your surveillance systems are designed to detect known technologies and familiar energy signatures," Sarah replied. "Humans have developed what we call stealth doctrines, military capabilities specifically designed to remain invisible to conventional detection methods." The display shifted to show cross-sections of human military installations. Interior spaces revealed weapon systems that incorporated physics principles the Galactic Database listed as purely theoretical. Defensive shields manipulated fundamental forces in ways that violated several accepted laws of science. "We've weaponized technologies that your civilizations considered impractical for military application," Sarah explained. "Humans excel at finding practical uses for theoretical concepts, particularly when those applications involve defensive or offensive capabilities." Ambassador Velterra's crystalline form had shifted to colors that indicated profound disturbance. "Ambassador Chun, are you informing this council that humanity has developed military capabilities beyond our ability to detect or understand?" "I'm informing this council," Sarah replied with diplomatic precision, "that humanity takes security very seriously. We've observed galactic civilization for several decades before announcing our presence. We wanted to understand your intentions before revealing our true capabilities." The implications crashed through the chamber like a gravitational wave. Every delegate suddenly realized that humanity had been studying galactic civilization while remaining completely invisible to galactic sensors. The technological sophistication required for such extended surveillance exceeded anything in known science. Ambassador, interjected the Hive Queen's drone. You're describing capabilities that suggest humanity could have remained hidden indefinitely. Why did you choose to reveal yourselves? Sarah's expression softened slightly, revealing the first hint of emotion she had displayed. Because isolation isn't sustainable long-term. Humanity needs allies, trading partners, and collaborative relationships. We're prepared to share our defensive technologies in exchange for peaceful coexistence. The offer hung in the chamber's recycled atmosphere like a lifeline thrown to drowning sailors. Every delegate understood that humanity was essentially offering to become galactic civilization's military arm in exchange for acceptance and partnership. What assurances, asked Counselor Mortha K. of the Silicon Collective, can humanity provide that your military capabilities won't be used aggressively? Sarah activated a new display sequence showing human military doctrine at its most fundamental level. Training facilities, strategic planning sessions, and command structures that reveal the military philosophy focused entirely on defensive capabilities. Human military doctrine is based on deterrence rather than conquest, she explained. We develop overwhelming defensive capabilities to prevent conflicts rather than to win them. Our goal is to make attacking humanity so costly that rational beings choose peaceful alternatives. Ambassador Tharn leaned forward, his four eyes focusing intently on the display. Ambassador Chun, your historical records indicate humanity has engaged in extensive warfare throughout your development. How do we reconcile peaceful intentions with military heritage? Ambassador Tharn, humanity learned through bitter experience that the best way to preserve peace is to prepare thoroughly for war, Sarah replied. Every conflict in our history taught us that weakness invites aggression. We developed superior military capabilities to make warfare unnecessary. The display showed the most remarkable footage yet. Human military exercises involving technologies that seemed to manipulate space-time itself. Weapons that fired projectiles at relativistic velocities, defensive systems that redirected incoming attacks through dimensional folding, and tactical units that moved through space as easily as walking across a room. These capabilities, Sarah continued, represent humanity's insurance policy. We're willing to share defensive technologies with galactic civilization, but we maintain sufficient military superiority to ensure our survival regardless of political circumstances. Counselor XY Pictura's bioluminescent patches flickered with patterns indicating deep consideration. Ambassador, you're essentially offering to serve as galactic civilization's protector. What do you require in return? Standard membership privileges, Sarah replied simply. Trading rights, territorial recognition, and peaceful coexistence. Humanity has no interest in conquest or domination. We simply want to participate in galactic civilization while maintaining the security measures that have served us well. The chamber buzzed with private communications as delegates consulted with their home governments through quantum entanglement networks. The offer was unprecedented, a single species volunteering to provide military protection for the entire galaxy in exchange for normal diplomatic relations. Ambassador Velterra called for order as communications concluded. Ambassador Chun, this council must discuss your proposal privately before making any decisions. However, preliminary consultations suggest cautious optimism. We understand the council's need for deliberation, Sarah acknowledged. However, there are external factors that may influence your timeline. She activated a final display sequence that sent shock waves through every delegate present. Long-range sensor data showed massive structures moving through the galactic void, clearly artificial constructs traveling at significant fractions of light speed toward inhabited systems. Our deep space monitoring systems have detected what appears to be an extragalactic force approaching this region of space, Sarah announced. Initial analysis suggests hostile intent and military capabilities that exceed anything in current galactic databases. The revelation transformed the entire dynamic of the session. Suddenly, humanity's military capabilities seemed less threatening than essential. An external threat that concerned humans was potentially catastrophic for the rest of galactic civilization. "How long?" asked Ambassador Tharn, his voice barely steady. "Before these forces reach inhabited systems?" "Approximately 18 months, Sarah replied. "Sufficient time to integrate human defensive systems with galactic infrastructure, but not enough time for extended deliberation." The chamber erupted in multiple forms of urgent communication as delegates processed the implications. An external military threat would require cooperation between humanity and galactic civilization regardless of membership status. The only question was whether that cooperation would occur within formal diplomatic frameworks or during emergency conditions. Ambassador Velterra called for immediate recess to allow emergency consultations with all member governments. As delegates scattered to secure communication facilities, Sarah Chun remained in the chamber, reviewing tactical displays on her personal device. "Admiral," she spoke into her communicator, "how accurate are our threat assessments?" Admiral Sarah Chin's voice responded through encrypted channels. "Conservative estimates suggest the incoming force could overwhelm current galactic defenses within weeks. They'll need our help whether they want it or not. And our defensive capabilities? Fully operational and ready for deployment. Every human world is fortified to withstand extended siege. Our mobile forces can provide protection for galactic civilization while maintaining superiority over any conceivable threat." As delegates returned to the chamber, their expressions showed the weight of impossible choices. Accepting human membership meant acknowledging military inferiority and dependence on a species they didn't fully understand. Rejecting human protection meant facing an external threat that could end galactic civilization entirely. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. Humanity was granted full membership in galactic civilization along with special authority over defensive preparations for the coming conflict. As the session concluded, Ambassador Chen addressed the chamber one final time. "Fellow counselors, humanity is honored to serve as your protectors. We'll begin deploying defensive systems immediately. Together, we'll face whatever challenges approach from the void." Outside the council chambers, human military vessels were already moving through hyperspace toward strategic positions throughout galactic territory. The galaxy's newest members had become its guardians almost overnight, transforming from potential threats into essential protectors. In the months that followed, as human defensive systems proved their effectiveness against the extragalactic invasion, galactic civilization began to understand what the universe looked like through human eyes, a dangerous place where survival required constant vigilance and overwhelming military superiority. The humans had found their place in galactic civilization not despite their military nature, but because of it. In a universe full of threats, peaceful species needed guardians who specialized in warfare. Humanity had finally found a purpose worthy of their greatest talents.